de este encuentro. Vamos a grabar. Sobre todo a los y las jóvenes. Eso es lo primero que queríamos agradecer por el proceso en el que estamos empezando, en algunos países empezando, como aquí en Uruguay, que por ahí anda gente, pero también en otros que van a ir comenzando a su ritmo, como decíamos desde el inicio, que es un proceso en el que cada país va a ir, eso, iniciando de acuerdo a la etapa del año, a los procesos de las y los jóvenes. Queremos agradecer a todos los referentes también que están ahí tratando de dar comienzo a este proceso que es largo, que ya empezó para algunos de nosotros el año pasado, para los países este año, y bueno, seguirá hasta el año que viene y después la tercera etapa. Agradecer también a la Institución Teresiana porque bueno, por ponernos esto sobre la mesa del cuidado de la tierra y la paz. Que bueno, vaya si es importante en este tiempo. Los que estamos quizás aquí más en el sur de América lo vivimos un poco diferente, pero todos somos parte de lo que está pasando. Así que, bueno, estamos agradecidas y agradecidos a la comisión de trabajo que venimos trabajando muy lindo y somos 10 personas y bueno, es un proceso muy lindo acompañar esta comisión y crear juntos. Así que bueno, estamos contentos y contentas de este momento. Elisa y Carmen creo que nos van a dar un saludo, así ya empieza Fernando, que estábamos desde temprano conectados. Bueno, también para ponernos en sintonía en este camino. No sé quién va a dar un saludo, si Elisa o Carmen o ambas, que las vemos por ahí.
Carmen, ¿quieres dar tú primero el saludo? Yo luego brevemente.
Brevemente, que con mucha alegría podemos estar aquí unidos, vernos las caras, los que estamos ya encauzados en este camino de trabajar juntos por la ecología y la paz, con la ilusión también del encuentro de Asís y la recogida después en los grupos, pero sobre todo la alegría de que ya estamos caminando juntos. Me alegra mucho poder participar.
Pues para mí también es una alegría grande el poder estar con todos vosotros y todas vosotras. Y como decía antes Roxana, especialmente con los más jóvenes que ya os incorporáis a este camino. Es un regalo que juntos podamos seguir soñando un planeta en el que realmente la paz y la paz entre todos y la paz también con la naturaleza sea lo que nos mueve también. Entonces, nada, una alegría grande. La institución teresiana quiere hacer esta apuesta del encuentro de Asís y contar con todos vosotros, con todos ustedes para este camino que nos va a poner también como en esa línea de sumarnos a otros hombres y a otras mujeres que piensan que es necesario cambios para vivir más en paz entre nosotros y con la naturaleza.
Pues muchas gracias a todos y sin más preámbulos le damos la palabra a Fernando Sada. Él es ingeniero y ha trabajado muchos años, ahora se presenta él y sigue trabajando en asuntos relacionados con la energía y también conoce hace mucho tiempo a la institución, ha estudiado en un colegio de la institución, está en un grupo como parte de un grupo en el que hay gente ACID, gente que está en ello. Entonces le damos la palabra a Fernando. Fernando, cuando quieras.
Okay. Can you hear me okay? Perfect. So before I start, so everyone knows that I'm going to run this presentation in English. I think in the chat, you can see 3 scripts with translation, so you can follow a little bit what I've been saying during this presentation. You will find one in Spanish, one in French, and one in Italian, if I'm not mistaken. Nevertheless, you have the automatic subtitles. If anyone cannot see the subtitles, maybe it's time to say it now, so you don't miss what I'm going to share with you today. Let me share my screen. Just 1 second. All right. You all must be seeing my screen now, the presentation. Can you confirm that with a thumb up? Yes, perfect. Thank you. You see it? Okay, perfect. So while I'm presenting, I will lose you, so I don't see you anymore because during the presentation mode, I only see the presentation slides. So if anyone have any question or want to interrupt me or whatsoever, just feel free to interrupt or raise your hands, and either Bea or whoever is there controlling, you can just stop me and I will come back to answer any concern or question you may have. All right. So let's start. I guess you all see the presentation mode, right? Good. So before I introduce myself, I'm gonna say that today I want to share with you my own experience as an engineer, but also as a Christian and as a member of the Teresian Association. Today we're gonna talk about two aspects in life which many people think that go apart, but we all know that they go hand in hand, right? Which is science and faith, science and our charisma as Christians and as members of the Teresian Association. Two concepts, two realities that Saint Pedro Poveda emphasized all way long his life, and that I want you to think about it, discuss, reflect, and pray today all together. I try to resume, to summarize everything in a very simple sentence today, and that is, in service of the earth, building peace with knowledge and faith. Well, my name is Fernando Sada. Nice to meet you, and let's start. This is the agenda of today's presentation. I'm going to start with a short introduction so you know who I am and where I'm coming from and who is this guy talking here today. And then I will navigate through the presentation, starting with the creation and our responsibility against creation, a little bit about climate change, about the role of energy. I'm going to talk a little bit about renewable energy. As Beatriz mentioned before, I'm an engineer expert in renewable energy, more precisely in offshore wind power. I will explain you a little bit what that is about. Then I'm going to jump into societal and ethical impact to finish with science and charisma and a final call to action. Okay. This is the first out of three, if I'm not mistaken, the first presentation of this kind embedded within this international meeting with young people with the Teresian Association. So hopefully you enjoy it, and let's start. I've been talking already for, 3-4 minutes, and you don't know yet who I am. So I'm Fernando Sada. I'm a former student of the Teresian Association School Instituto Veritas in Madrid, in Spain. And well, once I finished my studies and I started my career here in Spain and abroad, I've been spending several years abroad, more precisely in Sweden and in the UK. And about 5 years ago, more or less, I came back to Madrid. This is my hometown and my base of operations, even though I'm always in and out. And I'm a member, as Beatriz mentioned, of one of the groups of the Co-workers Association, or as you call it, EIJIT, here in Madrid. I'm an electrical engineer as a background with over 14 years of international experience, developing high-impact projects, more particularly in offshore wind power. And well, as you can imagine, I'm passionate about renewable energy, about sustainability and innovation. When I was preparing this presentation, I was thinking, okay, what I'm going to share to these guys here today? What can I bring from my experience that could bring any value to this meeting? And then a sentence, a quote from Saint Pedro Poveda came to my mind, which is the following: be yourself and try to be good for others. well, then I realized that even if the experience I may have is little, it could always bring any value. So I'll try to be myself. With a lot of humility, very humble, I will put my experience and knowledge at your disposal, and I will try to open this conversation. All right. I want to start first with creation. And I want you to reflect a little bit about creation and the gift of creation. In the Bible, we can find the Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and take care of it. I don't know if this is something that you have reflected before, but do we recognize God in the creation of the world? Do we feel responsible of looking after that legacy? In my view, if we understand the earth as a gift and caring as a responsibility, then we cannot just simply live in the world, but we need to live for the world. And that's the way I see it. And that's the way, as an engineer, I feel responsible of. Again, rescuing some learnings from Saint Pedro Poveda, which always emphasized on the integral formation. Ideas are not enough. We need people with ideas who act, right? So it's not just about words, it's about actions. So let us go forward with a strong, enlightened, and active faith. And this is all about it, okay? So what is climate change? In simple terms, I guess many of you have heard about this concept, right? Climate change, but just a little bit of theory. Climate change is caused mainly because of the percentage of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, right? The more coal we burned, oil and gas, the more carbon dioxide we inject into the atmosphere, into the air. And the more percentage of carbon dioxide we have in the atmosphere, the less reflection of energy that we receive from the sun we manage, right? So it acts, in fact, as a blanket, trapping the heat from the sun, which normally will escape to the space, and then warming up the world. And the consequences of warming up the world, we all know it, right? It causes rises of temperature, melting of ice, rising of sea levels, and extreme weather conditions that we are suffering. Just to bring your attention, I want to share some quick facts with you today. Earth has already warmer 1.2 degrees since 1880. Glaciers are shrinking nearly everywhere on Earth. The sea level has raised in the last century about 20 centimeters. Droughts, floods, and storms are becoming stronger and more frequent. And what do you think is the main cause of all this? It's not just by nature. The main cause is us, right? Human activity, and more particularly, the burning of fossil fuels. So the way I say it is that this is not just about nature that suffers. What is behind is the suffering of people, right? Especially the poorest and the most vulnerable communities. And here I want to bring you some few examples of how climate change affects peace, justice, and migration. I want you to travel with me a little bit. We're gonna travel around the world. And I want you to come with me to Africa, to Sudan, to Darfur. In this region of the world, the rising of temperatures and prolonged drought led to scarce water and grazing land. So this has resulted in the escalation of tensions between farmers and nomadic communities. And since 2003, we have an armed conflict still active, which is considered one of the first climate-related wars on Earth, which is still, it's alive. So if we reflect a little bit about this, scarcity led to violence, and violence led to displacement of people, suffering of people, migration of people. Another example, let's go to the Pacific Islands, right? To the Polynesia. Probably many of you have heard about the rising of the sea level. Well, the rising of sea level is actually literally swallowing people, swallowing homes, entire villages, and contaminating fresh water, drinking water. So that means that families, people are forced to migrate, to leave their homes. They are climate refugees, but they are not recognized as such. They have no legal protection at all, and they are not covered by any law, by any asylum law, because they are not recognized as real refugees. This is particularly worried in small nations, like, for example, Kiribati, Tuvalu, or the Marshall Islands, which, as you can imagine, they have contributed almost nothing to the global warming, to the climate change. However, these are the communities which are suffering the most. So entire nations are losing their land due to actions that they didn't cause, right? Like in many of these examples, the ones causing the harm are not the ones suffering the consequences. I'm sure we have a lot of friends here today from the Philippines. Probably you remember a typhoon called Haiyan in 2013. That was one of the strongest ever record in the Philippines. It was a category 5 storm with over 6,000 deaths and millions of displacements. So poor coastal communities suffer the worst, and still they struggle. They are still struggling to recover their lives, to reconstruct their homes, their villages. So in disasters, as I said before, the people lose not just their homes, but they lose their hope, they lose their future. And this is what we need to fight against. Last example, let's come back to Africa, to the Horn of Africa, to Ethiopia, to Somalia, to Kenya, where severe and repeated droughts are making people to displace, to move around, to migrate, caused by the food insecurity, over 20 million people. So people migrate to urban slums and across borders without any security at all. And when they arrive to these urban communities, they just need to set up very informal and simple settlements with very poor services. Who is suffering the most? As in many of these occasions, children and women, right? So climate migration often becomes not just a migration itself, but an urban poverty trap with no expectation, with no future. So climate change, we have reflected a little bit what it is about, the causes and the consequences. So there's a clear need for action, right? Climate change is a threat multiplier. It worsens poverty, increases inequality, it fuels conflicts and forces people to flee, to move, to migrate. So standing for the earth is also standing for human dignity and peace, right? But what's the role of energy in all this equation of climate change, right? We need to bear in mind that most of the world's energy comes from fossil fuels. Around 80% of the energy consumption is coming from fossil fuels, and only 20% of the energy production comes from renewable energy. And out of these 80%, 73% produces CO2 emissions, so carbon dioxide emissions, so contributes to the climate change. So it's obvious that energy powers our homes, our hospitals, our economies, our development, but it also fuels the climate change and the inequality of our society. Just some facts, again, to make you think about a little bit about it. 1 in 10 people in the world lack access to electricity, relying on polluting fuels for cooking or light. And in the rich countries, and we can consider that most of us live in rich countries, in that small portion of the world, we consume between 10 to 50 times more energy per person than in the poor countries. However, as we've seen in the previous examples that I shared with you today, the poorest are the ones that suffers the most. So there's no real development, right? There's no real revolution or transition here if we do not include everyone. And I want to make my own some words from Pope Francis in his Laudato Si. Let's not forget that real progress includes everyone. Otherwise, there's no progress. So we need to focus our efforts in a just energy transition, right? We need an energy transition that is clean, fair, and inclusive to everyone. We need an energy transition that reduces fossil fuels, emissions, as we saw before, that expands renewable energy, that it ensures that it's affordable for everyone, that creates jobs, and not only technology, but above all, that is inclusive, that it includes the poorest, it creates jobs, it brings dignity, it brings justice. So then, why it's important to talk about renewable energy? Because renewable energy is one of the, yes? Any question or anything? I heard something. No? Can you follow me? Are you following me? Perfect. Good. So I was saying why it's important renewable energy. Well, first of all, we need to understand what renewable energy is, right? So renewable energy is coming from natural sources, constantly replenished. Could be the sun, solar energy, the wind. We're going to talk a little bit about that later. Water, hydropower, biomass, geothermal, which is not polluting the atmosphere. So we are capable of converting that renewable energy source into electricity, right? Into power. We need to bear in mind that most of these sources, they have intermittency, right? They don't work all the time. We don't have sun every time. We need to adapt to the wind conditions. We do not have wind anytime we consume it. So we need to think, we need to be a little bit creative and think about mechanisms to store that energy or to manage in a very smart way the grid integration, grid strategy to handle, to manage that conversion of those renewable energy sources to electricity and to consume it to our benefit. Some key advantages of renewable energy. Low emissions, that's clear. It reduces drastically the carbon dioxide emissions into the atmosphere, reducing the climate change. It can be scalable. It means that we can have renewable energy infrastructure just for our homes, very small installation, up to power villages, cities, or even countries, right? Very important, job creation, wealth creation. And it's not just about engineering or development, it's about the installation, it's about maintenance and operation of these facilities. We need to make this energy accessible to everyone. And that's a very good thing because renewable energy, we can find wind, sand, water, almost everywhere on Earth. on Earth, right? So it means that we reduce the dependency of other type of fossil fuels, in those communities where there's almost anything. So we can have the infrastructure right where the source is and right where the consumption is, which is the most important. So renewable energy is not just about technology. In my view, and hopefully you share this with me, is a path towards climate justice and peace, right? We need to find a smart solution to produce that energy, to store that energy, and to build it and make it accessible to everyone. And that's why, and that's where engineering and ethics meets, right? As I said, there are a lot of examples about renewable energy. I just mentioned sun, water, wind. But at the beginning of my introduction, I said that I'm an expert in offshore wind power. So I felt the necessity to share a little bit, just a few strokes about what offshore wind power is. So let me show you, just very basic. Offshore wind power is the ability to extract energy from the wind, which is flowing off coast, right? Out of the sea. How we do that? We use wind turbine generators, the same way we do inland, but well, with a little bit of particularities. We could have wind turbine generators either installed in infrastructures which are attached to the sea bottom with monopiles or with jackets, or we could even install wind power generators on floating infrastructures. And we will see what are the benefits of the floating offshore wind later. Then, okay, we have wind turbine generators. Then we need to interconnect all those turbines. And that's what we call the inter-array cable system. Those are the cables connecting the different turbines between them to collect all that power. Where that power goes to? Normally, it depends, but normally it goes to a substation, an electrical substation, which could be offshore, so out in the sea. Why do we need a substation? This is a little bit technical, but just very simple. We want our transmission system to be as much optimal as possible. And what does it mean? It means that we want the losses to be as less as possible, right? A little bit of electricity. Voltage and current are inverse. So the more voltage we have, the less current we have. And the losses in the system are aligned with the amount of current. So the more current we have, the more losses we have in the system. So why do we use offshore substations? Very simple. We raise up the voltage to reduce the amount of current to reduce the losses of the transmission system. That way, we make our system as much efficient and optimal as possible, right? So that's why in most of the cases, we have a substation to optimize the transmission system. Then we have the transmission system. Those are the subsea cables going from that substation to land. And then they connect to another collection of substations inland to adapt that voltage and that current to the transmission system or of whatever country we are connecting to, all right? Why offshore wind? Well, it represents a huge advantage against other type of technologies because it allows us to convert the wind resource, which is, as I said, off coast. And we need to understand that the wind off coast is much more stronger and stable than inland. So we have an energy source out there in the sea that we can take advantage from. Also, we have to keep in mind that most of the human population is sitting on the coast, right? So it means that we have a wind resource very close to where the consumption is, or the majority of the consumption is. So it makes the transmission systems to be much shorter, much more efficient, much more optimal, right? And it's definitely a game changer in the clean energy transition. I mentioned before that we could have bottom fixed wind turbines. but we could also have floating wind turbines. And why floating offshore wind? Well, 18% of the wind resource is in waters deeper than 40 meters. It means that we need to find a technology to reach those areas which are fairly deep to take advantage of that wind resource. And that is the floating wind technology we have. By installing the turbines in floating platforms, we can reach those areas where the wind flows the most. We can technically install those turbines in places much farther, so we can address also the concerns of the local communities, and the visual impact, we reduce it as well. It's much less invasive than the bottom fixed infrastructure, because we just need some mooring lines to moor the floating platforms to the seabed. And it's also important that in case there's any failure, because there could be failures, is this type of technology is much more flexible, because in case we need to operate or maintain whatever or repair whatsoever, we can just disconnect those platforms, tow them back to the reference harbor, and then operate and repair them inland, which is much easier than bringing all the technology and all the team offshore, which is weather dependent and much more expensive. So
Disculpa, Fernando. Fernando, perdona, activa tu micro, disculpa. Ya,
can you hear me now? I didn't touch anything, so someone mute me.
No, está bien, perdona.
Did you hear what I said before, or how long have I been muted?
No, ha sido ahora mismo. Ya
Okay.
está. Sí.
Perfect. So as I said, building wind farms is not just about technology, it's about building bridges to peace, right? Again, I want to get inspired by Saint Pedro Poveda again to talk about society and ethical impact. Educate by enlightening minds and hearts. It reminds me that this is not just about technology. It's about people. We need to keep people in the center of our decisions. So I want you to reflect a little bit. Who is left behind and who gets benefits of this energy transition, of this energy revolution? Who is left behind? Rural and poor communities still using polluting fuels. Workers with fossil fuel industries in risk of losing their jobs. Global South affected by the climate change, as we saw in the examples I brought to the table. And people growing in polluting communities and with very poor environments. Who can get benefit of it? Skilled workers working for these new renewable energy generation industries. Urban populations getting access to a clean technology and clean energy sources. We can contribute to the wealth of the countries with capital investment and investing in governments, policies, and innovation. The title of this presentation was about science and charisma, right? Science and faith. And we all know as members of the Teresian associations that these are two concepts that are not separate, right? That they belong together. Science helps us understand the world, while our charisma, our faith, help us to transform the world, right? Science is about investigating the truth. It's about revealing the beauty of creation. Science provides us tools for today's crises like climate, inequality, energy. Science promotes innovation, efficiency, and optimization, right? Charisma, faith, engages with culture, educates deeply, transform from within, give us a purpose, discernment. It gives us hope, right? So where do they meet, science and charisma? They meet in face of the poor who lack that energy. They meet in the need of future for generations. They meet in the earth, which is groaning under our careless. So I want to again rescue some quotes from Saint Pedro Poveda. Where there's no room for God, there's no room for man. And I want to take this call my own, right? So how can I contribute? How does my faith shape my work as an engineer in my case? And I want you to think about it. I mean, you could substitute engineer by professor, scientist, economist. How does my faith shape my work? I've been reflecting a little bit about that. And I leave this question open, so for you to work in your local communities, in your team works, and maybe share your discussions and thinking. In my case, I found 5 pillars which I found fundamental. Service. My work is a way of serving others, right? How can I bring this clean energy to communities and reduce the harm to creation? We saw that creation is a gift and is our responsibility to care of. Hope. Faith reminds me that small actions, they have a powerful meaning and they have a huge impact. And the collection of those small actions, they make a real value. Faith pushes me to ask myself, am I part of the solution? How can I contribute? Is it justice what I'm doing? I can contribute as well with education. Educating by sharing my knowledge, my experience, my background, but also by my actions, serving as an example to imitate. And finally, following again Saint Pedro Poveda words, I feel I'm called to be a bridge between science and society, between science and faith, science and our charisma, between innovation and compassion. I invite you to think a little bit about it, how my faith shaped my work, which are my 5 pillars, my 4 pillars that pushes me to move forward, to go ahead. I want to finish with a call to action. So just kind of summary. We've seen that science reveals truth about climate, energy, challenges that we have ahead of us. Charisma or faith gives us a meaning. It gives us a mission to educate, to transform, to build peace. And finally, we need to act. It's not just about words, right? We said, Saint Pedro Poveda said, it's not about words. It's about acting. It's about action. It's about assuming that responsibility and build a new world. So let's us go forward with a strong, enlightened, and active faith. Let me leave you with 3 questions now that you can carry into prayer, into reflection, into conversation. I want you to think a little bit about it now with your groups, with your local communities, and maybe in the coming days to share what you think about it. These 3 questions are the following. What gifts has God given me for the earth? What gifts has God given me for the earth? How can I contribute? What is what I have that I can use for the benefit of the earth and the others? Next question. What am I willing to do about it? What am I willing to do about it? What I want to do is not just about the capability to do, but the willing to do. Where do I see injustice in energy today? Where do I see injustice in energy today? I gave you some examples before about how the poorest suffers the most, even if they contributed almost anything to the climate change or to the challenges that we have ahead of us. But there are many examples that we can think about it. Feel free to share anything now if you like. Otherwise, as I said, I invite you to pray, reflect, and talk about it with your communities, and possibly discuss in the coming days. As a summary, what can I do? What can I do? Well, what can I do? I can speak up. I can talk about climate, about justice, about communities. I can talk about faith and how that faith and science, charisma and science merge and they work hand in hand. Where? In our daily life, right? In schools, workplaces, with our families. What can I do? I can speak up. I can choose responsibly. I need to be conscious of the use of energy. I need to support clean power, vote for climate action, reduce waste, recycle. And finally, support others. We saw before that there's no real revolution, there's no real energy transition if it doesn't involve everyone. So we need to concentrate in helping others, and especially those which are most affected, those vulnerable communities. We need to act. It's not just about talking, it's about acting. I don't know if anyone wants to share anything before I close. No? Then just to finalize, I don't want to steal you more time today. I want to bring a last quote for everyone. You are the light of the world. We are the light of the world. So I invite you to let science, faith, and our actions, our voice, to shine for the earth and for peace. Thank you very much for listening. Any question, whatever, I'm here to listen to you and to talk. Thank you very much.